What's going on, guys? My name's Cisco, here to help you get into your money mentality. And I want to teach you guys all about credit. I want to teach you what credit is. I want to teach you the do's and don'ts of credit, how to build and repair credit. I want to teach you all about the different kinds of credit, just all of these things. But before we get into all of that, let's talk a little bit about what credit isn't. Now, the big thing of what credit isn't is it's not a number. And I know what a lot of you are thinking. Well, what are you talking about? My credit score. Well, I'm here to tell you your credit score doesn't matter. Almost at all. And hopefully it's not the first time you're hearing this, but I'd imagine it probably is. So let me explain to you what I mean by that. Your credit score is actually not an accurate measurement of your credit worthiness as a whole. And by that I mean your likelihood of being approved for a loan by a creditor. In fact, creditors don't even determine whether or not to approve you for a loan by looking at your score. It's not the first thing they look at, and it's not the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, or the eighth. Your credit score is actually the last thing they look at, and usually they don't even use it until after they've determined whether or not to give you a loan. So if this is news to you, then I'm sure you're wondering, well, what is my score even there for? Why does it even exist? So I'll tell you in a second, but I want to let you know that most people actually use their score incorrectly. And what I mean by that is, let me give you an example. So, have you ever looked at your credit report and looked at any of your balances on your loan and thought, let me pay this down or pay it off so my score will go up? Now, have you ever looked at your credit score and thought, it went up or down? Let me go see what caused that change. Now, if you're in the first camp, then you're probably one of those people that have been using your score incorrectly. If you're in the second camp, then congratulations, you're much closer to using your score as it was intended to be used. So, to answer the question, what is your score even there for? Your credit score is a very imprecise tool for your average person to track their overall credit health. That's about it. Unfortunately, people who usually lack any sort of financial education or literacy, unfortunately what happens is the score ends up becoming the goal itself rather than just being a tool. The biggest advice I could give is don't approach your loans and your credit with the goal of improving your credit score. You've got that backwards. Because much more important than the score going up or down is the activity that caused it. And it's those same activities that caused the change in your credit score are what your creditor is going to use to determine whether or not to give you that loan, like we said earlier, not your credit score. So really what you're doing is you're just using your credit score as an indicator for activity. That's it. It's like a notification. So I want you to think of the smaller, more incremental changes to your credit, not as necessarily good or bad, but just additions or subtractions to your overall record of your accounts. Now we'll talk more about what good activity is and what bad activity is in the next part when we talk about what credit is instead of what it isn't. But for now, again, just use it as a general indicator of activity. Again, like a notification for you to check and see what's happened to cause this change. And so I want you to look at your overall credit score, like the ranges, 500, 600, 700. These indicate a trend of activity. So these ranges kind of summarize what your activity has looked like recently, but it's not just the number itself currently. It's also what the number was prior to and how it's changed over time. But even taking both of these things into account, your credit score still isn't that accurate of an indicator because people with high scores are often denied for loans, and people with scores that are a little bit lower oftentimes are approved for loans. So why is that? Because there's a whole comprehensive list of things that make up what your credit worthiness is that determine whether or not a creditor will give you a loan that aren't even included on your score. Your score doesn't even track these things. Let me illustrate this point with an example. We have two people, and I want you to tell me which one is more likely to be approved for this loan. You have person A, who has a 750 credit score, but they really only have 2 credit cards, and they've only had their credit for 2 years. They've made their payments on time, and they don't have any delinquencies, versus person B with a 680 credit score. They've had their credit established for 15 years. The first 5 years of their credit were absolutely terrible. I mean, we're talking late payments, we're talking items going into collections, just all sorts of things. going completely wrong. But the latter 10 years, they turned things around. Things have been great. So now they're making their payments on time. They haven't made a single late payment in 10 years. But again, their credit score is 680. So which one do you think is more likely? Well, the answer here, in most cases, will be person B, because they have a longer standing credit history. For 10 years, they've shown that they are someone worthy of giving a loan to, and they've managed their debt very responsibly in those 10 years. Whereas person A has only had their credit for 2 years. So even though they've had great management of their accounts, they don't have much history for a creditor to go off of to measure whether or not it's safe giving them a big loan. Which actually brings up another point. It also depends on the size of the loan, but we're going to get into all of those things in a later part. For now, I just kind of wanted to show you why the score doesn't really matter as much as you think. And again, almost really at all. Your credit score should be just used as an indicator of activity. And the credit score, the change in particular, isn't so much what matters. It's what caused the change. And so in later parts, we're going to be looking into what makes up credit and what are the factors that determine what your score is going to be in the first place. You want to address these things more so than the score itself, because the score is very fickle and there are a lot of things that cause it to change, and it can be very stressful for you to see a change happen to your credit score. Oh, my credit score went down 15 points after I paid off a loan. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about why that happens, but it isn't something for you to stress over. And it's not something that's going to be really used against you in the first place. So hopefully you learned something. Hopefully this gives you some kind of relief as it relates to looking at your credit score, because when I talk to people, most of the time they really do stress over this. It is like life-changing when their score goes down 20 points over something that it's like, why did it go down 20 points over this? Relax. It's okay. It's not a big deal. You're not going to be punished for these kinds of things. And we're going to really get into why that is, when you will and won't be punished, and all those things are going to come later. But thank you so much. If you learned anything, please leave a like. Go ahead, subscribe or follow. And have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks a lot. Catch you guys later.